very good morning to you if you've just joined us, and welcome back to your Feel Good Breakfast show, Expresso, on SABC3. It's a Wednesday morning, in case you were wondering. Now, it's time for us to get into our parenting segment this morning, and the question we're asking is, have you ever been called an overdramatic parent who takes things way too seriously? Well, as a parent, it is, of course, the goal to seek out what's best for your child. But what if in seeking what's best for your child, you start exhibiting what's been called hysterical behavior? Well, this morning, educational psychologist Anel Annandale joins us in studio to talk about this kind of overreactive behavior and how to best prevent it. And it's good to have you here with us, Anel.
It's good to be here. Good morning.
So let's first start by understanding the definition of what is a hysterical parent, further and more than just being a parent who's upset by something your child might have done.
I think the hard bit is I'm not sure that there is a definition. It's usually the difficult thing about being called a hysterical parent is that it's criticism leveled at you from the outside. Somebody else decides your reaction is too big or over the top.
And how can they ever do
Exactly, that's just too much, right?
Yeah.
And I think what makes it different from being upset is usually we see the vigor with which parents approach, something they really are what we call hysterical about, or like these big reactions, and their persistence that something needs to change.
Yeah, so the big reactions, I guess, is what we typify as what could border on hysterical behavior, depending on who's judging.
That's it.
But in general, what are the causes of this kind of big reaction or big behavior?
In my experience, most of the time, it's when parents feel that they're not being heard. So it's wanting to get a message across and they're being brushed off or they're being ignored. And so their sort of reaction escalates in relation to this.
Yeah, and this is being ignored or being made to feel like you're not being heard by either the co-parent or a child or whomever else might be encroaching on your ability to parent.
Absolutely, or an expert, and you're going, no, but something's wrong.
So then, if you had to then look inward and not accept external judgment or advice, what then would you look out for as a sign for parental hysteria?
I think instead of looking for signs, and I think the first thing we want to do is sort of make the distinction between parents who suffer from mental illness, in which the reactions are really big. And this is not what we're talking about. We're talking about your average mom who is just escalating her sort of reaction because she feels she's not being heard. And I think instead of signs, maybe we should rather look at instances. So it might be a mother who shouts, because she's not being heard, or a mother who insists on a third opinion and a fourth opinion and a fifth opinion, or just refuses to leave a facility until her child has been checked out or helped.
Oh my goodness, okay. Give us a typical example. So if we are looking at a parent, let's say at a shopping mall, and the child is not necessarily paying attention to, no, leave that toy where it is, we're not getting that. And that instruction gets given 3 or 4 times. By the 4th time, it's leave that toy! Is that parental hysteria, or is the parent at full right to kind of raise their voice in order to be heard so that the instruction can be followed? What kind of examples are we looking at?
So that's it. But I think more, it's not usually a child who'll level that kind of criticism. Maybe your teenager will tell you you're being totally hysterical. But I feel it's often as adults from the outside will say, look, the mom's just, she's a little over the top, or she's too serious about this. But I think it's usually instances in where moms have a gut feel that something's not quite the way that it needs to be, and people are just not listening to that or looking into it.
Yeah, and reacting to it. And as we said, at the end of the day, you are trying to kind of give of your best to your child so that they can have the best in life. And so you feel like if that's not followed, if that route isn't followed, then we're not getting the best out of this parent-child relationship. But we're going to ask you to stay with us a little bit longer, and when we come back, we'll delve into the psychology of it more, and then hopefully give some advice as well as how you can cope with it, this hysterical behavior, and how you can hopefully curb it towards the future. So we'll be back again with Anel Annandale talking all things parenting this morning.
It's my Feel Good Breakfast Show.
A very good morning to you and welcome back. This is your Feel Good Breakfast Show, Expresso, on SABC3. Right on time you are to continue our conversation regarding overreactive parenting. I shouldn't have said that because we don't want people judging our parenting skills out there, but perhaps there is a moment for us to reflect on our parenting styles and improve on those. And that's why educational psychologist Anel Annandale is here to help us understand what it is to be an overreactive parent. And one thing I didn't ask is whether this parental hysteria, as we've described it, or overreactive parenting, is most common in mothers or fathers, and what would be the reason for this?
Look, you're most likely to hear about this hysterical mother, right? But I've seen the same behavior in fathers.
Really?
Absolutely. I think dads can also get quite, when they have a point to come across, they can be quite intense.
Yeah.
So generally what causes this is that feeling of not being heard, not being listened to, really needing to get a point across.
Yeah. So what do you find to be the best remedy for this kind of behavior then?
Listening. Absolutely, 100% listening. So often in my practice, I get this kind of criticism. The teacher will phone and say, look, I know mom's going to come see you tomorrow, but she's a bit hysterical.
Oh.
But usually when you listen to the parent and you really hear what they're trying to say, you'll also see that hysteria just diminish. All of a sudden, they're not being sort of over the top, they're being quite rational, and they work with you quite well.
Just to be heard. So maybe just
To be
taking
heard.
a back seat and not listening to respond, but listening to understand.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow, okay. Furthermore to that, then what about parents who've been overreactive or been overly dramatic and kept, going with their gut, but then ended up being right about what they were talking about? And, how do you look at that? What are the chances of that even being true?
Yeah, and we hear these stories all the time.
Yeah.
We really hear about moms who, from a young age, just something wasn't quite right with their child, and they went to expert after expert, and everybody brushed off their concerns. And 3 or 4 years later, the child is diagnosed with something like severe autism, or
Yeah.
something that could have been picked up earlier
Yeah.
and sort of intervened in. So absolutely, moms, remember that parents, everything within your body is geared, your senses, your brain, geared towards tuning into your child. And so you're much more likely to really, really know your child than anybody else who interacts with them. So if your gut is telling you something's not quite right, pursue that no matter how long it takes.
Okay, but then before we even take that step, then let's quickly try and see if we can find key differentiators between what is your gut telling you that truly something is wrong versus, Mom, you need to just take a tea.
That's so hard, because how do you actually know? I
Yeah.
don't know if there is a differentiator. I think parents also have a responsibility. If you are getting the same advice over and over, have a sit down, think about it logically, think about it rationally as much as you can, because your emotions are involved, right? So that's hard. But if you analyze all of that and there's still something that doesn't really fit with you or doesn't make sense, keep pursuing it.
Then keep pursuing it. So let's get some final tips and words of advice from you regarding this topic of overdramatic behavior from parents.
So I think from where I'm sitting, being called a hysterical mother is actually not the worst thing in the world. If you're hysterical, at least it means that you're involved with your kids, you're
You
interested,
care.
right? I think being neglectful and actually not being that involved with your kids is worse. So if you're a hysterical mom, take that on as like, okay, cool, I'll listen to that, but at least I'm involved.
Yeah.
And if you're the person leveling the criticism, I think perhaps the next time, we've all been in that airport where you see the mom going off and you kind of snigger, right? But if the next time you're in that situation, rather see whether you can step in and there's something that you can assist with.
Yeah. Well, Anel, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We really do appreciate it. We hope it was an enlightening conversation for you as a parent, that it helps you along that beautiful journey in developing that wonderful relationship between you and your child.